Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cracking Addiction. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and we have with us today Dr. Laura Petracek. Laura, I thought today we would continue our journey in the 12 steps and talk about the 10th step. What is the 10th step?
The 10th step, Fergal, is we continue to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
Right, and let's put that into context. This comes after the ninth step, which is what?
The ninth step is we made amends to all persons we had harmed, except when to do so would injure them or others.
Right. So you've been through a very challenging and, dare I say it, potentially traumatic experience of going through the ninth step, right? But the work isn't over. That's what I'm hearing.
The work isn't over, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize the ninth step as traumatic because it also involves a lot of healing and
Hmm.
reconciling in relationships. I
All right.
think the dramatic part is more uh, thinking about it ahead of time, like, oh no, how are they going to respond to me? Oh God, what if they're pissed off? How is
Yeah.
this going to turn out? I think that's more the trauma part is the dread sometimes, but usually for most people, this step involves a lot of healing and reconciling.
All right. But nonetheless, you would agree that it is challenging. And having done the ninth step, the work isn't over. You've still got to do this ongoing um, self reflection, really, isn't it?
Yes.
The work never stops. So is there some kind of specific process that you have to engage in for this ongoing self-reflection, or can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So a lot of times the 10th step is framed as the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth step all in one. It's like you're doing a spot check inventory.
All
You're
right.
you're like writing it down, or not really necessarily, but in your mind, oh, I messed up there. I need to say, I'm sorry, or whatever the amends is. But it's more of kind of combination of all those steps in one and be more current with how our behavior is affecting others. So instead of the initial inventory, looking at your whole life until now, especially usually your drinking and drug past, the 10th step is about what how my behavior is today and oh, I messed up or whatever the situation is, and then being current and making amends instead of waiting for another year to come back to someone or something and make an amends.
Right. So you've dealt with all of the past, and now it's really an ongoing self-correction. But every time there's an issue, you have to deal with it and address it with that other person. Is that what you're saying? As soon as you can.
Yeah, as soon as you can, or as soon as you recognize, like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I didn't handle that so well. Let me give
Yeah.
that person a call or send an email.
Right. And how often are you supposed to go through this spot check? Is it every day, every week, every month? Do you have to go to a meeting to do it?
No, you don't necessarily have to go to a meeting. It's more immediate, so it's more in the moment. So a lot of times we have good days and don't have to make amends at all. But then other days, we're being human, make a mistake or two, and then make our amends.
Right, right. So, in terms of actually the practical tips around doing it, it could be you don't even have to journal it. You don't have to attend a meeting. You could just think, oh, I need to say sorry, or oh, I need to rectify that.
Yeah. So at this point in someone's recovery, when you're at the 10th step, you've gained a lot more self reflection and self knowledge. And hopefully at this point, you're a lot more aware of how your behavior affects other people or places or things. And therefore, you're more current and you're more aware, like,
Right,
oh, that was, you know, that was not what I wanted.
right.
Whereas when we're doing drugs or drinking, we're basically oblivious for the most part how our tornado of a life is affecting other people.
So I mean, you said earlier that the 10th is really a summary of the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. I mean, in those steps, there is a very deliberate sitting down, writing down imperfections and wrongs, a deliberate process of speaking with and discussing with a sponsor, and a plan of action to actually go forward and make amends. None of that has to happen in that format in the 10th step. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, the 10th step is not really a formalized step like the previous 5 steps.
Yeah,
Again, it's more like in the moment, uh, in the situation, on the spot. But it does encounter those processes. It's kind of like a cheat sheet on those
right.
previous steps put together.
So, because you've already been through the formal training, as it were, the training wheels are off, and you're left to your own devices to actually constantly self-check and constantly go through in your own mind the previous steps as the 10th step. Yeah, you don't need to actually write anything down or discuss it formally with a sponsor.
No, you don't need to. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's constant,
Right,
but it's definitely a more open awareness.
right, right,
Sometimes a sponsor, maybe you're having a challenge, like, when you're wrong, to promptly admit it. And then a sponsor might say, well, why don't you go back to the fourth step? So let's say you're having trouble with your boss. Why don't you write a fourth step about that situation,
right,
to get more clarity before you make or don't make an amends?
right. Okay. Is this something that you discuss in groups? I mean, you've mentioned in other episodes that there are fourth step groups in the 12 step progress process. Is there a 10th step group?
So step groups, Fergal, are we rotate. So one week is the first step, the next week's the second, like the step meeting. So the overall theme of the group is called the step meeting. So, like the group I'm in last night, we read the first step. And you usually each week then do the subsequent step.
Right,
And then you start after 12 weeks, you go back to number one.
right, right. But that's not the format for a lot of 12 step meetings. I
No,
mean,
a lot of 12 steps meetings are a drunkalog or a drugalog, and you tell your story, what it was
yeah,
like, what happened, and what's it like now. And then there's sharing involved. But what I like about the step meetings is that it's more structured.
yeah,
There's tools talked about. It's more focused on recovery.
yeah.
Whereas, the stories could get a bit limiting after a while, and maybe not as helpful as a step meeting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's actually borne out in the evidence. There was a Cochrane review on the efficacy of 12-step programs, and they did say that for those programs that did actually have a recovery focus, there was very good evidence of efficacy. But sadly, there was nothing mentioned about those programs that, as you say, were just story sharing. The exchange of war stories. So, whilst the exchange of war stories might be interesting, welcoming, unifying in the beginning of a process, you do need to move on to the healing part, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I've reflected on myself as we're going through this journey is the fact that the self monitoring is not actually focused on substance consumption or alcohol consumption. It's focused on all wrongs. And I'd like to make 2 points here now. I think we should discuss these 2 points. Firstly, the breadth of the self reflection in terms of personal growth really can apply to anyone. You don't actually have to be substance affected to actually get benefit from going through these steps in terms of developing your personal growth journey. And secondly, there seems to be a kind of a link between improving or growing in all areas of your life and a reduction in substance use. What would you say to those two thoughts?
Uh, so I do agree. I mean, there is actually a workbook, 12 Steps for Everyone. I do
Yeah.
believe that the 12 steps, uh, anyone could benefit from them. I'm, I wasn't exactly clear. So are you saying that if your life's improving, then you're using drugs and alcohol less?
No, well, yeah, yeah. Well, what I'm trying to say is that the steps don't, or this, at least the 10th step, does not specifically acknowledge or mention substance or alcohol use. It's talking about any wrong, as if to say that all wrongs are a function of substance use.
Oh, I see. But yeah, they're not at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I
So,
agree.
so
Yeah.
really, the breadth of the introspection is really widened, and for me, it really is a journey of personal growth, whereby you can think about, I want to be better today than I was yesterday in all aspects of my life. It's not entirely focused on consumption of substances and the ill effects thereof.
That's correct. I mean, after you come in the program and start in the first step, that's pretty much in the rearview mirror. And then moving forward, it's how
Yeah.
your life and your behavior and your actions affect today. And then you're taking inventory on today, which is for most people, then they're clean and sober when they're doing this step. It's not like the fourth or fifth looking at the wreckage of our past. This is looking at, the shortcomings of today.
Now we know that substance use disorders, alcohol use disorders, are chronic relapsing diseases, and we have to acknowledge the possibility of relapse, don't we?
Well, that's an interesting question. I I tend to disagree. I think,
Oh, good. Tell me.
and why I say that is because I think it puts, like, I've been continuously clean and sober for 47 years, and I think that in a way, when we say relapse is part of the disease and people mention that all the time, it almost like I feel like it gives people permission to go back out. Like, oh, well, it's part
Mm,
of the disease, so, or it's part of substance use disorder, so here I go.
mm,
Um, it's like it almost gives them a pass, I feel, you
yeah.
know, and then people come back, we're like, yay. But I just take issue with that relapse is, to expect relapse, because then I feel like it plants this thought, oh, okay, expect a relapse. Oh, well, but
So
I feel like
how
if we
do we deal with relapse then? Because we can't deny the possibility of relapse. So
we
how
can't
do we deal
deny
with
it,
it?
but I feel like if we close that door, meaning it's not an option, because you really could have that as not an option, I mean, okay, I'll just really quickly, like for me, I mean, my history and through this podcast, initially before I came in, I tried to commit suicide, but I have made a commitment to myself, my higher power, my family. Like, that's not an option. That door is closed. And I feel we could do that also with substance use. Like, that's not an option anymore. I feel we could
Hmm.
more concentrate or bring that message, like, that's not an option anymore. Let me see what else I could do. But I feel there's so much permission, and oh, that's okay, you could go out 50 million times. And I, I I think that could be changed.
So the fact that you're able to say that is not an option, is that a function of your recovery or your internal resilience, or is it, or did that statement actually give you your recovery and your internal resilience?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what came first, the chicken or the egg, but
Well, I beg to disagree with your disagreeing, because I feel that not an option, I think, is something that you grow into as you recover. I think there are to say to someone in the throes of a substance use disorder, that's not an option.
Well, maybe, okay, I think you have a point. It's not necessarily something I would say in the beginning, but of someone's recovery. But yes, I feel as people get more traction, more time, it becomes less and less of an
Yes.
option. The more you're building
Exactly. Yes. I think
life.
we've found the middle ground. I completely agree with you. I think
Mhm.
once you get to a certain point of healing, you can look back and realize, well, actually, relapse is no longer an option for you.
Yeah, like I don't want to
Yeah.
go back. There's a I don't see this in rooms, but I remember when I lived in New York City, there was a poster that said it's easier to stay sober than to get sober. And that
Yeah.
always stayed with me because it's so true, right?
Yeah.
And you see that in the rooms, people that relapse. I mean, it's really hard to get out of that,
Yeah.
uh, you know, hole. Yeah.
It's hard to get out of the rut all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 But on the subject of relapse, relapse isn't a process as if where the bubble bursts and then bang, you're back drinking. Relapse, I've had it described to me as a process where you start mentally giving yourself permission to do things that you wouldn't otherwise consider, or you start mentally giving yourself permission to stop doing the things that you know are healthy for you.
So in the rooms, they call it picking up a drink or a drug is the last step of the relapse. Um,
Exactly.
so meaning the first step is cognitive, right? Or cognitive
Yeah.
distortions,
Yeah.
being this, that, and the other, who knows what's happening, or
Yeah.
resentments. And then
Yeah.
by the time you pick up, that's the end of the relapse because you've already laid
Yeah.
the groundwork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, relapse then is a process that has a long lead-in time. And that for me is the opportunity for the 10th step, because during that long lead-in time to the last step of relapse, which is picking up that drink, the 10th step can be crucial in turning you around and getting you back on the horse, can it not?
Yeah, you mean for coming back from a relapse?
Yeah, because if
Yeah.
you haven't actually picked up that drink,
Oh, I
yes,
see.
you might have stopped doing the self-care, you might have stopped investing in relationships, you might
Right.
start engaging in those cognitive distortions, which for me is relapse. But you haven't yet had that drink. But if you can start thinking about the 10th step, that's the time to start repairing the cognitive distortions, repairing the lifestyle, repairing the relationships, which then get you back on track.
Yes, this 10th step could be an intervention in that regard.
Yeah. So for me, it's a very powerful message of hope and growth. And really, another idea that I've got is recovery from whatever substance or process really is like cycling uphill. The minute you stop cycling, you start falling backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, there's all these phrases. There's sayings in the room that the further you are away from your last drink, the closer you are to your next one.
Yeah.
So kind of an
Yeah.
analogy
Yeah.
to what you were just saying. Although I
I
don't know, buy some of them. To me, it's not all trudging. Uh,
well, for me, this idea of recovery and cycling uphill is also it's also for me the same as personal growth, because if we stop trying to grow, we're going backwards.
Well, I disagree in the sense of there's times in our personal growth or in recovery that we do plateau, that we can enjoy the fruits of all the work and
Yeah.
step work and personal growth that we've put into this.
Right.
I don't think it's
Right.
like, myself every day, every day. No, I don't see it like
Well, I mean,
that.
I think if we start enjoying the plateau, we're resting on our laurels. That then leads us to pride, and you know what happens after pride?
Yeah, but I think that's also more of a it almost seems like a British mentality.
Or is it
The step
an
over the
Irish
next,
Catholic mentality?
yeah, Irish Catholic mentality.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't
Well,
know.
perhaps, but all right. So we've agreed then that the 10th step is really an ongoing iterative process that incorporates really all the previous steps from four till eight,
Not.
four till nine. We've agreed that it's a process that allows us to prevent the slip into relapse, and we've discussed the practical tips. Can you give us an idea of some of the challenges that people face when they're going through the 10th step, or as they're leading a life of the 10th step?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is to stay on our side of the street, meaning, yeah, well, maybe I did that, but they did this. So I think a lot of times we want to approach it as a give and take sort of amends. And
Hmm.
that's not what it is. That's not the 10th step. But I mean, personally speaking, I wish it was more of a dialogue instead of, oh yeah, I effed up. So sorry about that. But so I think that gets in the way of, well, look at they did, or they did this, or they did that. And maybe they did, but but that's not the issue. The issue is our side of the street. And I think that is what's challenging a lot of
Mm.
10th step.
And what's the solution to that?
Well, I think part of it is really letting go of our ego or trying to, to be aware of it, gain awareness. Like, oh, here I
Mm.
go. Okay, I'm focusing on them instead of myself, and that's not going to get me
Mm.
anywhere. I can only change myself. Things, things like
All
that.
right. All right. Well, on that sweet note, Laura, we've run out of time, so I'm going to have to thank you for your expertise, and I look forward to speaking with you again very shortly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Fergal.
That's all for today, folks. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.